Tax season is in full swing. The deadline to file your taxes is April 18th. The IRS expects more than 168 million individual returns to be filed this year. So if you haven't started thinking about your taxes, now is the time. And here to make sure we're ready is CPA Bert Huggins. Bert, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me. I'm really glad to be here. It's a pleasure to talk about taxes.
Awesome. So what information do we need? What documents do we need to gather?
Right now you're getting your W-2s, 1099s, those kinds of things in the mail. Obviously you gotta have those, but during the year you need to gather documents too, as far as your receipts if you're making deductible expenses, charitable contributions, those sort of things. You want to have those during the year ready for your file when you get your other document.
Okay, and what are common mistakes that you see? How do we avoid them?
So one of the most common things we see with taxpayers is they act before asking their professional. So what we like to tell people is if you're contemplating a transaction that you don't know the tax effect or you're kind of worried about the tax effect, talk to your tax professional first. If you wait until tax time, the year is closed and it's a little too late. We can do what we can to try to mitigate it, but a lot of times you can mitigate or defer your liability ahead of time instead of after the fact.
Now, the IRS has been warning that tax refunds could be a little bit smaller this year for a few different reasons. Could you talk about that?
Yes, they definitely will. Some people may be a little shocked when they get their refund this year. So the American Rescue Plan was part of the COVID relief in general. And it did some expansion to tax credits, the child tax credit and earned income tax credit to name two. And those expansions have expired at this point. So for example, someone who had a child under age 6 on their 2021 return would have gotten a $3,600 credit. That credit this year is only $2,000.
Wow.
So that's a big change that people will be seeing.
That is a big change. And then talking about credits and deductions, what are the differences? Is one better?
Great question. Yes, and a lot of times people don't understand this. So a tax credit is much better than a tax deduction, right? So the deal with a tax credit is it's a dollar for dollar reduction in your tax. A deduction is only a percentage reduction. So if you can get a tax credit, it's always better than a tax deduction. The 2018 tax law made a lot of changes to deductions for normal individual taxpayers. Right? It eliminated some that were more common, such as the home office deduction for a employee. It also got rid of deductions like what you pay your accountant. It just kind of simplified things. So at this point, for 2022, the standard deduction for a married filing joint couple is about $26,000. So unless you overcome that limit, you're going to take the standard deduction. The way you do that is through your charitable contributions, your home mortgage interest, tax payments, and then medical expenses as well. The thing with taxes and medical expenses is they're subject to other limitations. So a lot of times, unless you have a catastrophic illness.
A lot of people file their own taxes.
Sure. At
what point should someone seek out a professional?
Right. So if you just have a W-2, you can probably do it yourself, and you could probably use TurboTax. Don't ask your tax professional about it. We don't use it. But if you have your own business, a small business, if you have some complicated transaction, you've inherited some property, you're selling that property, that sort of thing, you may want to seek a tax professional. But if it's just straightforward W-2, you can probably handle it on your own. Okay,
and we've talked about the deadline, April 18th, but what if you need an extension?
Yes, we love extensions. Extensions are not a bad thing. The deal with an extension, though, is that it's an extension of time to file, not time to pay. So any tax that you owe is still due on April the 18th. But it's a simple process to file for an extension, and then you have up until October to get all your documents together and get it into the government.
Okay, well, CPA Bert Huggins with some great tax filing information. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me.